Welcome back. Going to check in right now with our analyst for today. That is Rudy Husny. Our feature is brought to you by good folks at Guaranteed Industries, reminding you that they have been serving Montrealers since 1957. Now teaming up with Can Air, so a brand worth promoting, high-efficiency furnaces and heat pumps. For all the details, 514-342-3400. Rudy, good afternoon. I was going to ask about Pierre Dufour. What do you think about this? So we finally had today the suggestion, at least, saying it out loud too, that maybe he, a former CAQ, member, might be a good catch for the provincial Liberals. What did you make of this?
That's always the risk when you're kicking out somebody out of caucus, or if you're not appointing somebody as a minister and you're already a member of parliament. You can either resign and have a by-election, which is a worst-case scenario for the government, or you can decide to look at another party, and that's what maybe Pierre Dufour is doing. So that's why it's so difficult when you do a shuffle and you have to pick some players, because that can happen, and that's not a good sign for the CAQ when you have like this an independent member now who can either go to another party or perhaps just resign and have a by-election, which is going to be the case, for example, for André Laforêt, who is stepping down and who's going to run for mayor in Saguenay. That means another by-election, and we know what happened the last by-election, the PQ won.
By the way, it's not a good look for the CAQ. The question, we were talking to Jim Meny before, suggesting maybe this is not a great look necessarily for the Liberals, as in, can they not find anyone else in that riding who would be a suitable candidate, as opposed to taking someone who was formerly with another party?
Yeah, that's true also, because maybe there's somebody who have been active, who have been volunteering for the Liberal Party of Quebec, who wants to have a seat or who wants to compete and have the seat. So it's not also a good sign. Maybe some volunteers will say, why are we taking somebody from the CAQ? Why don't we pick somebody from our own family who maybe have put on the effort and who's been there for a long time?
We also had New Palace data polling that's out today, and if you could say the news is getting, if it's possible, any worse for the CAQ, it seems it is.
Oh, yes. I mean, having 11%, even the Conservative Party of Quebec, who doesn't have a seat in Quebec, is at 15%. I think it's the worst poll ever for the CAQ, even when they were at opposition. I think that even when François Legault created the party, they were on more than 11%. So yes, so tomorrow the shuffle is going to be important. But at the same time, I don't see it as a magic wand in terms of people know who the premier is, but in terms of ministers and who's going to have this portfolio or that portfolio, don't forget, at the end of the day, they voted for François Legault, they voted for the CAQ. It's not a question of, it's because he's having this portfolio, or her, she's having that portfolio is going to change everything. So, and the worst of it is, we've been talking about that shuffle for the past 2 months, and the government hasn't been able to be on the offensive, because all we're talking about is this minister is going to move or that minister is going to move. So I think that it wasn't a good move for the premier just to announce 2 months before that he was going to have a shuffle. And now, I mean, the expectations are high. We'll see who's going to end up where, but I don't see it as something that can, re-energize the government as much as I think Premier Legault thinks it's going to happen.
So are you part of the club? I don't know if I asked you this last week, Rudy, as to when, first of all, if and when you think Premier Legault would just call it a day and resign?
I think maybe Christmas is always a good time to think about your future. We saw what happened with Justin Trudeau. I do believe that he's going to try to do everything he can this autumn and trying to put forward an agenda, try to make some changes. But the reality is that people are not paying attention to what he's saying, and you can see it in the polls. People are willing or looking for a change, and I think that maybe during Christmas he's going to think about his future. But I do also think that he thinks he's the best one who can maybe save his party. But I don't think that's going to happen, especially not with the shuffle.
Let me ask you what you think about the story municipally here. I had Soraya Martinez-Ferrada on the air earlier this afternoon, and I said, it must be odd. You're a mayoral candidate. There's a Léger poll out now that says, guess what? You're number one in terms of who people have said they think they would vote for mayor, but that number is only 18% because the number one answer is, I don't know.
Yes. It's very interesting, because normally you would expect that the party who's asking for a third mandate, people will want to have change exactly the same way we're looking at the provincial level, But when you look at the municipal level, people don't see Soraya Martinez as the change, and people don't know. It's true that the campaign is still early. We haven't seen, for example, debates and so on and so forth. But it's not a good news. And what's interesting is that when you look at the spectrum, I mean, Soraya Martinez is maybe center-left. Obviously, Monsieur Rabouin is more left, and Craig Sauvé is very left-left. So there's nobody, I would say, on the right spectrum or the center-right spectrum. So I do think that there's a lot of space for somebody to try to put forward a more aggressive agenda when it comes to, for example, law and order and all of that. But for the moment, that's what we're stuck with.
Does that mean then that if someone has to sort of change and that has to become the focus, you're talking about a new party or a new candidate or someone like a Soraya Martinez?
Now, yeah, I do think that Soraya Martinez must maybe refocus her campaign more to the center-right. But the problem is that she's also been identified with the Trudeau Liberals who are more on the center-left. So it's a bit difficult for her also to kind of try to change her focus.
I would ask one other thing. It's interesting when you look at the numbers. Craig Sauvé, who of course now has his own party running, right? And he wants to be mayor. Even him, who doesn't have much of a, I guess, or at least as far as Quebecers are concerned, not that recognizable a guy, despite the fact he served in city council for a number of years. He's in at 7%, which for, the third guy looking in doesn't seem so bad.
Yeah, the reality is that nobody in this race have a lot of name recognition. Even the Luc Rabouin, who's supposed to be number 2, 17%, I don't think that a lot of people know him. But that's usually what happens at the municipal level. The thing is that they need to have a lot more exposure. They need to do the groundwork. But sometimes things can happen. Things can happen very fast. Remember Mélanie Joly at the beginning when she was running for mayor? Nobody knew about her, I think, the first day of the campaign, and she was second at the end.
Which kind of brings me to that question as well. I didn't think we were going to talk about this, but I'll bring it up anyway. This idea, and Craig Sauvé brought this up, of ranked balloting, where you would actually, like they do when they're voting for leader of a party, he thinks that'd be a good idea for a municipal election. Now, I understand he doesn't have the authority to do that because it would be a provincial law that would have to change or be amended. But what do you think of that idea?
It's always the same thing. When you are in the opposition, you always want to change the rule. But when you get into power, you say, look, that's the way I was able to win, so I'm not going to change anything. It was the same, for example, with Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau said he wanted to change the rule when it comes to preferential ballots, and when he was in power, he didn't do it. So I do believe that always when there's an election, that's going to be a topic. Let's change it, and let's make sure that maybe people be more represented. But at the end, when the party is in power, they don't change it.
It gets forgotten about. You're right. Last thing, just really quickly, I asked our audience today, with respect to the announcement by Mark Carney about the EV mandate being on pause now for 2026, and then taking 60 days to consider, of course, what is still supposed to happen by 2030 and 2035. He's taken a bit of a beating from environmentalists, wondering what's going on, why he's abandoned former Liberal principles. What do you think?
I think that at the end of the day, Mark Carney is going to have some problem with the left side of his party because for the moment he's using the conservative playbook. We've seen it on the carbon tax. We are seeing it now with electric vehicle. So I do believe that, yes, Mark Carney got elected as a Liberal, but for the moment he's governing as a conservative prime minister, that's for sure.
Do you think it's fair, the criticism he has been taking so far, despite the fact he's only been on the job for a few months, with respect to, let's say, Pierre Poilievre saying, hey, he's getting nothing done? Is that fair?
I do believe that he needs to deliver. If he doesn't deliver at Christmas, I do believe that people are going to ask questions, and you can already see it in the polls. For example, there was at least 10% difference between the Conservatives and the Liberals, but the latest poll showed that they're about neck and neck. So I do believe that people are giving Mark Carney a chance. But if he doesn't get results, especially, for example, on the Canada-U.S. file, or even on housing, on immigration, on economic files, if he doesn't get results before Christmas, I do believe that people are going to slowly say, hey, we elected you as a banker. And don't forget, the big test in October, the budget.
Yeah, that's right. The budget coming. We're actually getting one. Rudy, thank you so much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, Anne.
Take care.